YouTube! How y'all feeling? I'm Littles, back with another reaction video. Tonight we got 4 most disturbing Reddit confession posts. We ain't gonna waste no time. Let's get into it.
On May 8th, 2025, a Reddit user asked a grim yet straightforward question on r/askreddit, stating, "What is the most messed up thing you have ever done?"
I wiped my ass with a Clorox wipe before.
Initially, replies to this were filled with
wet wipes.
Either obvious jokes or relatively tame confessions involving relationship drama. However, after about 30 minutes of the post being live, one user replied with a disturbing comment that stood out from the rest. It read, "I ran over a woman and her child in California in '96. I don't remember the specific city, but I'll never forget it was the intersection between Vanowen Street and Lewis Avenue. I think the mom died, but I don't remember what happened to the kid. I got away scot-free, and I'm only telling this because the statute of limitations already passed."
I ain't gonna lie, bro. I ain't saying this shit cool or whatever. But it's the type of shit you take to the grave, especially if you kill somebody, bro. You don't just confess that shit on the internet or anywhere. Unless it's somebody you trust, you tell him. But like, come on, bro. That's shit you take to the grave.
Now, it's not uncommon for people to just make up shocking stories on Reddit for attention. And at first this didn't look any different until another user did some digging and discovered an LA Times article from July of 1996 about what seemed like the same incident mentioned in the comment. That article, along with others from the time, not only confirmed the OP's claims, but also revealed the horrifying details of what actually happened that day. According to the reports, the victims of this incident were a 19-year-old girl named Ruby Moreno and her 1-year-old daughter. Ruby had taken her daughter to a nearby hospital on the morning of July 29 to treat a few minor cuts she got while playing. She stopped at a relative's house on Vanowen Street on her way back and was about to return home at around 10 p.m. But as she was attempting to get into her car on the driver's side, she heard a loud screeching noise from behind. She looked back and saw a car barreling towards her at 100 miles per hour.
Damn,
according to other witnesses, this car had swerved to avoid hitting a van just seconds earlier, causing it to lose control. Seeing this, Ruby panicked and started running from the speeding car with her daughter still in her arms. Unfortunately, luck wasn't on her side that day. Before she could reach the sidewalk, she tripped into the street and was struck by the car moments later.
Damn.
The impact sent her flying over a parked car and onto the roof of another. The baby was also tossed several feet into the air before falling on the asphalt. Miraculously, the baby didn't receive any lethal injuries and was able to survive without any lasting damage to her body.
Okay.
Ruby, however, wasn't as fortunate. She was rushed to the hospital but succumbed to her injuries the same night. As for the driver that hit her, witnesses reported him trying to flee the scene, hitting another...
Bro, you shouldn't even be going that fast down a block. Like, come on, you shouldn't be going like down a block. You going 100 miles per hour. You should only be going that fast if you're on an expressway and nobody really around.
Car and then a curb before successfully getting away. And from everything I could find, the perpetrator was never identified or arrested. So if this Reddit user was telling the truth, there's a real chance he was the driver behind the brutal hit and run nearly 3 decades ago. The report from 1996 also mentioned that the driver was likely intoxicated due to the way he behaved after hitting Ruby. And when asked, the user admitted that this was the case. Were you drunk at the time, as the article says, or were they wrong about that? Inebriated, sure. More high than drunk. I was on a lot of junk back there. But the most disturbing part of his confession was just how cold and remorseless he seemed about the entire incident.
Right.
Why no sympathy? Was this on purpose? No, but it's been so long. It's like a whisper of a memory. Do you think about how that child has to live without a mother now? Genuinely asking, you seem stone cold. It's been 30 years. That child probably has children of its own. I seem stone cold because I've already been through all the stages of emotions. I've justified myself, I rotted with guilt, I've had sleepless nights. I'm an old man now and I'm waiting to die any moment. I can't change what I did. I can't even pay for my crime anymore because California doesn't send people to prison only on a confession. And regardless, my health alone would render me incompetent to stand trial. There's nothing tying me back to that day but my word. Which brings us to the big question, was the OP actually telling the truth? Unfortunately, the answer to this is a bit more complicated than it initially seems.
But what an old ass man doing on Reddit though? Maybe like, I feel like he just say he an old man. What is an old man really doing on Reddit? What is an old man really doing on the internet? On his, well, no, you come across old people on TikTok, but like on Reddit. Come on.
Murders.
Then he just said it was like it's a whisper of a memory, but you just can that's the first thing you thought of when somebody asks what's the craziest thing you done. I don't know.
Story does match an actual incident that happened back in 1996, right down to the exact intersection he mentioned in his confession. He also added several details that didn't seem made up, and even gave a reason for why he was finally willing to confess now, because the statute of limitations had long expired. That said, there also seems to be some potential inconsistencies. Some reports claim the driver was with another passenger, and that they actually fled on foot. However, the OP not only didn't mention any passenger, but also claimed that he still had the car. He even cited its damaged condition as the reason he became aware of the accident, writing, "What was your reaction to what happened? I was too hopped up on various types of drugs to notice. It was only the day after when I saw the dried blood on my bumper."
Damn.
This could point to the possibility that the OP wasn't behind Ruby's accident at all. He maybe stumbled upon the 1996 article online, memorized key details like the year and the street name to make it seem real, and then fabricated the rest of the story as users pressed him with more questions. All just to get some attention on the internet.
Right, no,
But at the end of the day, we don't know. Although if he was telling the truth, several users have already alerted California authorities of his comments.
I mean, even if the nigga just say you old as shit, what is jail time gonna do? Like, I mean, the most you do is give him like the needle, like the death penalty, but like.
In May of
It was so long
2012,
ago.
a Reddit user asked others to share a secret which, if came out, could ruin their lives. And while this post received over 44,000 comments in total, one chilling confession stood out above the rest. About 9 hours after the original post went up, a user replied with a haunting story of his own, reading, "I accidentally killed 7 people."
How the fuck do you accidentally kill 7 people? Like, unless you really got mental shit going on with you, bro, like you're something wrong with your brain chemistry or some shit. How do you accidentally kill 7 people?
"I put a rag into a new water heater exhaust to keep debris out and installed it in a rental. I get a call a week later, there's been an accident. I show up and there's a ton of EMS and police. They ask me where the gas shutoff is, and I go down to shut the gas off and see the end of the rag I forgot sticking out of the top of the heater.
Damn.
Rip the rag out, shut the gas off, and headed upstairs, only to be told all the tenants were dead.
Damn.
I drink all day now and sleep. It's killing me from the inside every single day, but if I say anything, my family is ruined. We have a bunch of rental properties and we'd be shut down." This reply caught the attention of thousands of other users who wanted more details on what exactly happened. Unfortunately for them, the account that posted this was a throwaway, and the OP didn't post a single comment after that, possibly to avoid incriminating himself any further. But when users didn't get the answers they were looking for from the OP, they began looking outward, and it didn't take long for someone to track down the news article talking about the tragic accident. According to these reports, the incident took place on December 16, 2006 in Kirksville, Missouri, where 7 victims, including 5 young adults and 2 children, passed away in their sleep due to carbon monoxide poisoning. However, while this part matched what the OP said in his comment, the conclusion the investigators reached was completely different. In his report, the police chief spearheading the investigation stated that the heating system was functioning properly and was not the source of any problem. Instead, one of the victims' vans was left running in the closed garage. This generated a lot of carbon monoxide throughout the night, which slowly filled up the apartment and eventually ended up taking the resident's life. So, did the OP really get away with killing 7 innocent people because of his gross negligence? Sadly, the answer is not as clear-cut as many would hope. There are multiple possibilities, and any one of them could be true. For instance, if we assume that OP was telling the truth from his perspective, it's completely possible that the accident did have nothing to do with the heating system. But since the OP saw the rag stuck in the heater, he assumed it was his fault and has been blaming himself ever since. On the other hand, there's also a chance that everything unfolded exactly as the investigation concluded. OP just took this real accident and made up the story about him forgetting the rag for attention on Reddit. This would also explain why the police would let him casually walk into a potential crime scene without any supervision. We can even take this a step further and assume that the OP wasn't even the landlord and just read about the incident online.
True.
That all said, it's still completely possible this story is legit and that the rag was the cause of the deaths, or perhaps a combination of the van and the rag. The OP hasn't posted any new updates on his throwaway account in the last 13 years. So whatever the truth is, we may never know for sure. On May 2nd, 2017, users on the Canada News subreddit came across a lengthy post titled, "Wanted for Kitchener Murder, My Side." This was a reference to a horrific murder that took place in Kitchener, Canada just a few days earlier. And to everyone's shock, this post was written by the prime suspect, Ager Hussein. He was still on the run but wanted to tell the internet what exactly happened on the night of the incident. However, what seemed like a desperate attempt to share his side of the story would later turn out to be a part of his plan to evade the consequences for his actions. Though the events that led up to this started 15 months earlier in February of 2016, when 21-year-old Ager Hussein met 21-year-old Melinda Vasilier in Kitchener. The two quickly became infatuated with one another and began dating just weeks after their first encounter. However, while things went quite well for the first year or so, the two eventually started bickering and fighting with each other. This resulted in the two breaking up in April 2017 via text, and that's when things took a turn for the worst. Not long after their breakup, Ager attempted to break into Melinda's home through her patio, but was spotted by her friend Anna and her boyfriend. They also called the police on him, forcing him to leave Melinda alone. However, he kept texting her even after this incident, asking to meet her at least one last time. She eventually agreed and invited him to her home, hoping to talk things through and end the relationship on respectful terms. They decided to meet on the night of April 27th, but when the time came, Ager didn't show up. Melinda had asked her friend and sister to stay with her at home while Ager was visiting. However, since Ager was a no-show, she gave them the go-ahead to carry on with their night and the two left. They returned shortly after midnight, and to their surprise discovered that Ager had shown up while they were gone and was now in Melinda's room with her. The girls confirmed Melinda's safety before heading off again to get food. This trip took barely 30 minutes, but by the time they came back, things had somehow spiraled into a complete nightmare. The apartment was in complete disarray and there was no sign of Ager anywhere. And as they stepped further into the apartment, they found Melinda lying face down on the kitchen floor in a pool of blood with her body covered in dozens of wounds. They rushed in to check on her, but tragically, it was already too late. Melinda had no pulse. After composing themselves, they contacted the police and told them everything they knew, sparking a nationwide manhunt for Ager. However, despite days of searching, the investigators were unable to find anything about his current whereabouts. That is, until a post from Ager himself popped up on Reddit explaining everything that happened from his perspective. He opened his monologue by going over the history of his and Melinda's relationship, how they were perfect together, and that he was even planning on proposing to her before everything fell apart. After spending a bit more time going over the timeline of the relationship, he moved on to talking about the day of the incident. And according to him, this is what happened after Melinda's friend and sister checked up on them. We continued to talk and finally decided it was worth it to try one more time. Anna and her other friend left the house to grab food. We both let everything out and our relationship was back on track. As I'm getting ready to leave, she asked me if I had done anything with any other girls while we were on a break, or any time we were on a break. I told her we needed to be honest and said yes and told her about it. She started freaking out, wouldn't say a word, just kept slapping me with tears in her eyes. Slaps turned into hits. I told her I was sorry, but if she didn't stop, I'd do something back. She didn't stop. I then stupidly pushed her, harder than I expected. She fell against the sink. This was the first time I ever did something physically violent towards her. I told her I was sorry. She said, leave now. I began saying sorry even more and asked if I could get a hug. She was still crying. I go up to her to try and give her a hug. Almost out of nowhere, she grabs a knife by the sink. Initially, I thought she was just going to hold it to try and tell me to leave. She doesn't. She comes at me full force, aiming towards my face. I tell her to stop. She doesn't. I tried grabbing the knife but ended up cutting my hands. After a few cuts, I lost it. I freaked out. I was scared and in a state of shock. Never in 100 years did I think she would use a knife against me. Out of shock and fear, I grab one. I hit her with it, almost blindly, a few times. I didn't know what happened. I was confused, shocked, and scared. I had no intentions of that happening. When I left, I honestly thought she just passed out. Then I looked at the blood and started freaking out and just ran. I didn't know for sure she had died until the next day. I honestly had no intention of ever doing that to her. I was protecting myself. From there, he went on to talk about the
bro, she did come at her. He did come at him with a knife first. It was kind of stabbing him. But I'm pretty sure the door is right there. You could have ran. You could have walked out as soon as you saw her pick up a knife. Even if, you could have just shanked her a little bit and then ran out, They talking about some multiple wounds, like drowned in a pool of blood.
Of regret and sadness he was feeling for what happened to Melinda. He also expressed his shock over the news, calling this a targeted attack. Now, on their own, these look like the words of a man desperately trying to clear his name after an accident, when in reality, every word in this post was carefully selected by Ager to make himself look as innocent as possible. For instance, he claimed that Melinda often slapped and hit him near the beginning of his story, so that it doesn't seem suspicious when he mentions it later. When, according to people who knew her, Melinda was extremely sweet and had no violent tendencies. Ager also downplayed the break-in attempt, claiming he merely visited her house to talk, and even left out the part about Melinda getting a restraining order against him following that incident. He also mentioned that he swung his knife just a few times in self-defense, when in reality, autopsy results showed a staggering 47 different wounds on her body. Luckily, by this point the police knew that he crossed the border a few hours later and was now hiding in the US. And while it did take them a few weeks to pinpoint his location, they were eventually able to arrest and charge him with the murder of his once girlfriend.
Damn.
Further investigation also revealed other twisted methods he tried to seem more innocent, like sending a message to Melinda saying, "Nice seeing you tonight, glad we worked things out. Anyways, see you soon," hours after committing the crime. He stood trial on October 2023, where the jury concluded his motive boiled down to, "If I can't have you, no one can." He was given a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 16 years.
Damn.
On June 7, 2019, a throwaway account made a post on the Confessions subreddit claiming to be responsible for the deaths of several people. The post opened with the OP talking about his life goal 4 years ago, how he didn't get stuck in a 9-to-5 cycle, so he came up with a different business plan, selling substances. However, this really didn't work out as well as he'd hoped. He hated meeting people in person and was constantly afraid of someone finding out who he was and where he lived. But then he learned about a popular marketplace for illicit substances on the dark web and started using that to conduct business. Things were going well, and even upgraded from selling just 3 substances to shipping several much more potent options as well. Unfortunately, what started as a major boom for his business turned into a massive disaster when he accidentally sent the wrong items for a few orders, stating, "I put all my addresses into an Excel spreadsheet along with their name, zip code, order, along with the amount. At the time, I was selling some super white powdered meth. The was also a white powder. Very similar consistency. Long story short, my Excel messed up or I messed up, and about 7 people's orders were filled in as orders. They all went out. I didn't notice and kept doing my thing for a few days. After about 5 days, someone contacted me and told me their friend died from my meth. I immediately called BS and went to check my order log and scale up how much I had of my medicine left. Well, I had about 11 grams more than I should have. I still don't know how it could have happened. I wasn't a user, but I definitely was high." Put simply, the OP accidentally sent a much harder substance to his customers.
Damn.
And while I can't mention its name on YouTube, it is known to be extremely lethal in even relatively small quantities. He later searched the names of these customers online and discovered that at least 5 of them had passed away due to his mistake. The sheer gravity of his actions prompted him to immediately abandon the drug trade and rebuild his life, stating, "I immediately deactivated my vendor account. I didn't even need confirmation. I knew what happened. I knew I just killed several people. I sold the rest of my drugs, converted my Bitcoin to cash, and moved away. Didn't speak to anyone for weeks. Found a job in a restaurant, living in a city I always wanted to. I haven't touched drugs since that day. I haven't had anything to do with that life since then." However, the OP ended the post by claiming that, despite getting as far away from his old life as he possibly could, the guilt of being responsible for so many lost lives still weighs heavily on him, and that the only reason he confessed everything on Reddit was to finally get it off his chest, hoping it might bring him some sense of relief. Now, whether this actually helped him feel any better or not is completely unknown. This was his first and last post from this account, and he hasn't posted any updates since. As for if he was actually telling the truth, that much is uncertain. It's near impossible for me to track down any news articles about his unfortunate customers, given that over 100,000 people every year lose their lives from that same substance. That said, many users in the comments believe the story was genuine, and some even express sympathy for the
like, why are you buying drugs off the dark web anyway, bro?
Though I doubt we'll get any concrete answer on this confession's legitimacy anytime soon.
Stick to weed, bro. You don't need all that extra shit. Anyways, I love y'all. Y'all be careful. Make sure y'all tune into the streams. If y'all can't tune into my my VOD channel. I'm posting all my Twitch stuff in there and just extra stuff. Make sure y'all tune into that. I'm gonna leave the link into the description to the channel. And yeah, see y'all next reaction video. Yeah.